Alright, time for the video that no one wanted, but I'm going to make anyway. To put some preface to it, back in 1993, something very important happened that changed the gaming world. There was released a game that turned trading cards into something you could play with. Magic the Gathering was the first CCG, the longest standing, and right now the most selling, most powerful CCG in a lot of instances. Well, Magic the Gathering came out in 1993, and as a result of that, everybody and their dog decided to make a CCG. I'm not kidding, like everybody and their freaking dog decided to make one. And if you know what card back that's for, you know secrets that man was not meant to know. But in any case, there's one copycat group CCG impersonator that spawned out of the 90s that sticks out like a sore thumb over all of them. And that is this one. This is a rather special game. You'll notice one thing off the bat, that it's a bit different than most card games. See that? Quite a bit different than most card games. This is the game known as Heresy. Not to be confused with the favorite battle cry of Warhammer 40k players. But Heresy is a very interesting game. As you can see, it's different than most other card games because it's tarot-sized. It's a tarot-based card game. And let me just explain Heresy as best as I can. Heresy is a game about angels. You see, the angels of Heresy once lived in what they called the light. Pretty much it's heaven, but they were followers of the light, and they existed in heaven, and there was a great ruin that caused them to fall to earth. And this occurred actually in our future, weirdly enough. So you have angels that fall to earth, and there's now like a gloomier atmosphere to the world. It's very post-apocalyptic, very 90s actually. Has that same feeling that The Crow or The Prophecy or any of those movies like Dark City, anything from that time period would have. And you can see in some of the artwork. This is artwork by Bram. Yes, Bram. He actually did artwork for this series, and his aesthetic shows up everywhere. Tim Bradstreet of Vampire the Masquerade fame did a bunch of art for this game. And I appreciate, he makes nothing but good pieces for this game, I gotta say it. Although, I'll talk about artists later. This is actually something I didn't expect to find. There's an art piece in this game, I haven't looked to see if there's others, that's done by James O'Barr, the original artist and creator of The Crow, the original comic book, not the movie, though I'm very sure that the movie influenced them to bring along James O'Barr to work on the project. The Prophecy was released in the same year that this game was, in 1995. So I'm pretty sure that there was some cross-influence as to what kind of flavor they were taking with the game. Now, Heresy works a lot like a lot of other CCGs did until people started getting really creative with the mechanics. You essentially have character cards, much like creatures in Magic the Gathering or personalities in Legend of the Five Rings. They have an attack and defense stat. In this game, they also have a free will stat, as well as an Aeropagus voting stat, which, if there's a thing called the Aeropagus, in which the angels actually vote. I'll go over the mechanics here in a little bit. And you had angelic creatures, both celestial and infernal. That's the fun thing about this game. They did not make a differentiation between an angel and a demon. They're the same species as far as they're concerned, which is actually pretty accurate to actual religion and mythology, although our own culture mythology says differently. There are plenty of mortals in this game. Here's another Tim Bradstreet piece looking very much the part. There's mortals that have like a darker, muddier background, and there's certain things mortals can't do that are present in the game. We'll get to that in a bit. But mortals are there, and they kick around. And you have land cards, much like you do in most other games. Literally, it's called a domain, which is their version of a land. It has a statistic for attack and defense, like a creature does, because in this game, you can attack your lands. That's a primary way to actually play the game. You have a land, and you attach the person to it. The person defends the land and takes the damage first. The land is then attacked afterwards during the same combat phase with leftover damage. And then you have this. There were array cards. Arrays are like lands, but they exist in your matrix. In a game, this would be your wilds area. We have a bunch of wild guys kicking around in the wilds of the ruined world. Then you would have the matrix, which would be consisted of your technological stuff, which is what this represents. Technology in this game also has a weird thing where when you discard technology from your hand or off the top of the deck sometimes, you can put it into an archive pile and save it for later. You can draw off your archive pile instead of your deck with certain effects. Now, there's other things you can expect to find in this game that are in everything else. Let me put this out, by the way. There's a matrix with a Irish array and a black angel in charge of that. There are enhancement cards. These green, weird-looking cards are the enhancements. Buff your characters, mortals or angels. Often it doesn't say both, like Matrix Host. You could attach this to the black angel if you really wanted to. I think this is a debuff, though. The art is by Kane Ferguson, and it's great art. I'm going to go over that in just a second. There are items and enchantments. These are called alephs, and they represent various different artifacts that angels carry around with them. Being angels, they have access to things like that. Then you have celestial powers. Here's some beautiful artwork by Kaluta, and these celestial powers are kind of like sorceries in Magic the Gathering. You played them only during your turn, only during the start of the phase, and they did stuff. They're written in 6-point font. They're so annoying, especially since I'm older now and I can't read them as well as I could when I was really young. And this is what your miracles look like. Miracles are interrupts, essentially. Sometimes they don't have a cost, in which case you just play them. This is a technological interrupt, so it can go into the archive with everything else. But miracles essentially can interrupt actions during the game. And so you'll find at least a few of those in every deck ever made. One thing I got to bring up about Heresy, there's a few things about it that, first of all, this is not a game for kids. It has a lot of drug use is a very common theme. There's a lot of fan service in there, which I consider a good thing, although the fan service in this game has no bias. There are tons of naked and scantily clad women. There are tons of relatively naked men. I don't know about scantily clad, but I see a lot of naked dudes running around in this game. But to top off the good point about this game, it's got some amazing art. This is Kaluta's work. This is Raziel holding his scroll, dictating the word of God. Freaking awesome looking art. And this is Malik, a judgment angel holding two swords. How nice. That's just some nice art. I'm glad that I have this in my collection. Here's Fanuel reaching back with his sword, looking to met vengeance upon his enemies. This is art by Kane Ferguson, who I think is one of the best gaming artists in the world. I saw his art first in Magic the Gathering, and I just had to own his art. I went and collected his cards just because I liked them. Abadona kind of reminds me of a character that was made by Privateer Press about 10 or so years later. And the Carnivian. Where have I heard that name before? Well, this is 1995, and we're seeing Kane Ferguson drawing the Demon Carnivian for this game. Here is the demon Persan, a lion-headed demon. Looks great, by the way. He reminds me of like some kind of Scots Gaelic. I wouldn't say furry. He's like that one guy from Magic the Gathering who runs around the double-bladed spear. I forgot his name. Great art in this game. Now let me just cover one thing about Heresy. This is why it didn't win as a game, is the size of the cards. It got lost to history because these cards are they don't accessorize very well. You need special sleeves to hold them. They only ever made one set of Heresy. They did release planned concepts for a second set that never saw print. They're on the internet somewhere, and they have been since the 90s. I could go find them, but oh well. The deal is that this is actually a good game lore-wise. Like, if you pick up the cards and just flip through them and look at the art, the game setting is great. It's got this weird... The angels are in a cyberpunk, dark, apocalyptic future trying to ascend back to heaven. Whichever side through whichever method. And the lines aren't as clear-cut. Angels and demons may look alike. Mortals and angels have their own kinds of power in this game. The one thing that really killed this game, as far as gameplay was concerned, is how you had to win. You won by collecting Tau storage, it's this little symbol here on your arrays. You collected Tau storage until you had 15 of them. At the start of your turn, you would bow arrays that had... They call it open in this game, but you'd bow arrays that have Tau stored on them, usually in the form of tokens, equal to 15 or more. Poof! The moment you did that at the start of your turn, you won the game. Now, I may have forgotten, is it actually the end of the game? I'm not sure, but I know that you had to bow arrays. So not only did you have to have these lands in play, doing normal land things, and they also provided virtual support so you could bring arrays into play, but you had to have the arrays to gain the condition to win. So you kind of had to spread your land game over two different frontiers, and you had to protect your ground pretty seriously. You had to protect your arrays up here because other angels could go hack into the net, attack your array from their array, and just take stuff from you, literally. So it's one of those things where you had to divide your 60 plus card deck into the stuff you wanted on the ground, the stuff you wanted in the Matrix. Yes, it was 1995 and they called the internet the Matrix. Huh. Funny, right? It's almost like it's prophetic or something. You had to tie up your deck with all these different things. Plus, there are two things I'm going to bring up that are kind of interesting. When you hacked into the net, and as a mortal, or if you did not have the net walking ability on your cards, you had to put a body down here on the land, and then you could hack into the Matrix. Now, some guys with the net walking ability could just post directly to the Matrix, and that was cool and all. But for the most part, you had to leave a body token down here that had to be unique per card. Otherwise, you'd lose your body token. So you couldn't just bring a bunch of green glass beads and play the game. You needed a bunch of different tokens. And you needed really unique looking stuff to be the bodies. So you had a body over here. I guess you could use miniatures. That could be cool. But anyway, you had your body over here, and then you'd hack into the net. And now the Cacophonite can help out the Black Angel in defending this array to people who want to steal your Tau power. Oh well. If this terrain down here was destroyed and your body was on there, he was lost in the Matrix. And if this Matrix ever went down, he was lost for good. He couldn't jack back into the real world or anything. He was just lost for good. So that level of complexity I actually kind of like. But let's compare it to another game that I haven't brought up that did complexity in a game right. Legend of the Five Rings had complex stuff in there, but you weren't required to have two different land types. All you really had to do in Legend of the Five Rings is bring gold-producing holdings into play, attack provinces with your personalities, and win. Honor was a secondary option that often worked. Enlightenment was a secondary option that kind of worked. But you could avoid them and just go for the simple game if you wanted to. Nothing like this in Heresy. So Heresy had a big disadvantage, not only between card size, which is Heresy's unique claim to fame, but you had a very complex game you had to weave. This game is tough to play. On top of the fact, there's this thing called aerophagous voting, where aerophagous voting goes back and forth, where if you want to put a title on someone, so there are special enchantments called titles, and they said down here, enhance host title. It's really hard to read, but you could attach this title, and they could always go on hosts. You don't attach them to mortal heathens, you attach them to the hosts. But if you did that, the other guy on the other side could say, hey, I want your title. And he could call a challenge. And there's different ways to do challenges for. But what you do is you have a bunch of angels that just say, okay, I'm voting. And so you get the standing vote for every readied angel. Hasn't been opened for action. They cast their aerophagous votes, yours on your side, the other guy's on their side. And then you can choose to bow them during the second part of the phase to add their free will to that as well. Once you add their free will to that, you then tally up your points and you can either vote to say, no, you get the title instead. Or you can challenge someone and be like, I'm taking your ass and your title. And then you divide the points of your votes into attack and defense value bonuses, secretly apply them, and then flip them the same time the opponent does. And that determines the fight right there. That complexity is actually really cool. I like it. But if you stop and think about it, this game could have benefited from the Legend of the Five Rings idea, where you maybe separated cards in the decks or allowed certain cards to start and play from the beginning of the game. As it stands, Heresy is a long-playing game. It is hard to play quick, short games of Heresy. You draw 11 cards at the start of your game, and then discard down to 7. So you should have lands in your hand, etc. But the thing is about the game is that technically, you really want to build a bigger deck. Since you draw 11 cards at the beginning of your game, having 71 cards in your deck is a good idea. You only draw one card at a time, so the play just takes forever, kind of like Middle-earth the Wizards. That's how Heresy ran as a game. So what do I think of Heresy overall? Well, who cares what I think? The truth of the game is that it's definitely a dead game. One set only in print. And if you really want to go the length to try to print extra cards for it from a different concept, they haven't been very... this is pretty much what the game is. And it's deader than shit. And it has a weird collector's value where the guys who own this game are trying to get the most money they can out of it. I was really lucky that I have a few boxes laying around from older days. I had some stuff missing. I bought a few things back in, what was it? I think it was 2010 on eBay, something like that. If you have it, it's fun to play. I really like the lore. I think the lore of this game could have risen up to compete with the likes of Magic the Gathering and Legend of the Five Rings. and Warhammer 40k and BattleTech. There's no joking. There's a lot of joke flavor text in the beginning of Magic the Gathering, a lot of the early arcs. Not in this game. All of with the exception of like one or two quotes here or there, every last flavor text is hardcore serious, and a lot of it has that gothic poeticness that makes for a really awesome dark setting. I am a fan of Heresy. I think it's really great. It is a good game in the fact that it's an old school game. It is one of those games where you sit down with a friend and you spend the entire afternoon deking around with cards, playing in this alternate universe of angels lost in an apocalypse where their only salvation is the internet. Strange, right? Well, this is Heresy the card game. If you like it, that's great. If you don't, go ahead. There's better things to do with your life than play Heresy. Yes, it is not related to Warhammer 40k in any way, shape, or form. It really isn't. But in any case, the game is lots of fun, in my opinion, and has some things that drag out and make deck building a pain in the ass. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you don't fall into the loop of playing old dead games that no one else plays. But if you do enjoy collecting old dead games, you might want to give Heresy a look at. And then cry over your wallet later. Trust me on that one.